when a blizzard wrapped a little town in silver snow and gentle candlelight. What secret dreams softly woke on Christmas night, 1882? The last afternoon light of Christmas Eve in 1882 rested gently over the small mountain town, as if it too were growing sleepy and soft. The mountains rose in quiet, dark blue shapes around the valley, their peaks already veiled in drifting mist, while the sky above the rooftops carried the pale, expectant color of snow yet to begin. Wooden houses leaned close along the narrow streets, their eaves low, their shutters painted in faded greens and blues that the summer sun had once brightened. Now, in the cold, the colors seemed to whisper and dim, wrapped in the stillness of early winter twilight. Smoke rose in calm, straight ribbons from chimneys, carrying the scents of pine logs, baking bread, and the faint sweetness of spices saved for this special night. In a narrow lane near the center of town stood a small bookshop with a bell above the door and two wide front windows, clouded at the edges where frost was beginning to form. Above the shop was a modest room with sloping ceilings and beams darkened by time. This was where Elias lived, the town's gentle schoolteacher and caretaker of sorts, a man who had grown used to being needed in a quiet, unspoken way. He was not old, though the children sometimes thought so, because he moved slowly and spoke in a low, careful voice, as if every word should land softly and not disturb the air. His hair was threaded with early silver, and his eyes were the calm blue of water at evening, clear and kind. Elias stood at his small window, one hand resting on the wooden frame, and looked out at the street below. The boards beneath his feet creaked with a familiar, comforting sound, like a sleepy house breathing. Down in the lane, he saw the last cart from the outer farms rumbling past, the horse's breath rising in fading puffs of white. The driver sat hunched in his coat, shadowed by his hat, leading the horse with patient clicks of the tongue as they made their way toward the stable near the square. A woman hurried by, her arms filled with bundles wrapped in brown paper, her boots leaving crisp marks in the thin layer of snow left from earlier days. From somewhere close by came the muffled laughter of a child, a short, bright sound quickly pulled indoors as a door opened, then closed, letting a small burst of warm light spill onto the street before the latch slipped back into place. The sky above the town was changing. All afternoon, a wide band of cloud had been gathering along the horizon, soft and heavy, like wool pulled slowly over the world. Now it had risen higher, its underbelly touched with a pale, silvery glow, and the light that filtered through it made every surface look gentle and muted. Elias watched as the last clear patch of blue dimmed and disappeared. He could feel the air thickening with cold. It was not a sharp or cruel cold, but deep and steady, settling into the corners of the street, into the folds of his coat, into the dark spaces between houses where the wind liked to wander. He had lived through many winters in this town. He knew that the snow that came with such clouds would be strong and lasting. On the table behind him lay a small stack of papers, the children's handwriting marching unevenly across the pages, lessons in arithmetic, small poems about snowflakes and Christmas bells, careful drawings of stars and pine trees. Elias had been reading them all morning, pencil in hand, marking not mistakes, but tender little triumphs. A letter formed clearly, a sentence completed without faltering, a drawing that caught some simple, honest shape of joy. Now, as he turned away from the window for a moment, he rested his hand on the stack and smiled, remembering the faces that went with each page. The children had left the schoolhouse that afternoon with bright, eager eyes, already half lost in the dream of gifts and sweets and the long, peaceful evening ahead. He hoped they were warm now, their hands wrapped around mugs of something hot, their cheeks flushed from the walk home. He shrugged on his thick wool coat and wrapped a soft, knitted scarf around his throat. The scarf was old, but it still held a faint scent of lavender from past summers, when he had stored it away with dried sprigs in the chest at the foot of his bed. It was a scent that reminded him that seasons turned and returned, that winter's hush always made way for spring's birdsong. Taking up his hat and a small basket, he blew out the single oil lamp on his table and descended the narrow staircase to the shop below, his feet placing themselves with the practiced care of long habit. The bookshop was dim, the air cool and faintly dusty, full of the quiet presence of old stories waiting in their rows. He did not light the lamps. Outside, there was still enough daylight to guide him. The bell over the door chimed softly when he stepped out onto the street, its familiar silver ring echoing in the stillness. The town felt more peaceful than he had ever known it, as if it were holding its breath. Snow had not yet begun to fall, but the whole sky looked full of it. The clouds were thick and close, their edges blurred, their color a deepening gray that carried the promise of white. Elias adjusted his scarf and started down the lane, his boots tapping gently on the packed earth, leaving only the faintest of marks. He had promised himself that before night truly came, he would check on a few of the older townsfolk who lived alone. It was a small habit of his, almost a ritual on nights of heavy weather, and the people knew to expect his quiet knock. First, he went to Mrs. Lindholm's house, a narrow building with a steep roof and a little wooden bird carved into the lintel above the door. She was a widow with weak eyes and a kind heart, who kept a neat garden in summer and a pot of soup on the stove in winter. When she opened the door to his knock, the warm air of her kitchen wrapped around him like a blanket, filled with the gentle smells of onion and bay leaf and baking bread. Her gray hair was pinned back, and her hands, though knotted with age, were strong and steady. Elias asked, in his calm, low voice, if her woodpile was enough, if her lanterns were trimmed, if she had everything she needed for the night. She laughed softly, a sound like old paper turning, and told him that he fussed too much. But she let him bring in an extra armful of wood, and he checked the latch on her back door, and her eyes shone with quiet gratitude. As he left her house and moved along the street, the light changed again. It thinned and cooled, slipping toward evening. The roofs and chimneys rose around him in dark shapes against the pale sky. In the distance, beyond the last houses, he could see the shadow of the forest at the base of the mountains, a dark fringe where the wind gathered and spoke in long, low sighs. There was a sort of hush in the trees, a waiting. Even the crows that usually perched on the bare branches near the edge of town were nowhere to be seen, as if they, too, had sought shelter from what was coming. He called briefly at 2 more houses, speaking soft words, checking doors and windows, making sure that no one would go cold or be alone in need. At each place, he was given some small token in return: a strip of dried apple, a twist of sugared almonds, a candle carefully wrapped in cloth. He tucked these into his basket and thanked them with a nod, feeling a gentle warmth that had nothing to do with fire. The town was not wealthy. Many things were scarce and had to be saved and stretched and shared. Yet on this evening, the spirit of giving moved quietly through every doorway, like a dream passing from person to person, leaving a trace of light behind. By the time Elias turned back toward his own street, the first fine flakes had begun to fall. They were small and few at first, almost shy, and they melted at once when they touched the earth, but they multiplied quickly, drifting down from the heavy sky in a soft, steady pattern, turning the air into a slow, silver veil. He stopped for a moment in the middle of the lane and tilted his face upward. The snowflakes brushed his skin in light, cool kisses, and he closed his eyes, letting the quiet of the moment sink into him. The town around him seemed to grow softer at the edges. Roofs, fences, and steps blurred as a pale dusting settled over them, transforming hard lines into gentle curves. As he climbed the stairs back to his room above the bookshop, The fading daylight followed him in through the window, carrying with it the soft shimmer of the falling snow. He set the basket on the table, placing each small gift carefully aside, and drew the thin curtain aside to look out at the street once more. The sky was now a deep, velvety gray, and the snow had thickened into a calm, unbroken descent, straight and steady, as if the whole world had decided to fall asleep under a white quilt. No lamps were lit yet in the windows, but he knew it would not be long. This was the hour when day surrendered gently to night, when people would reach for matches and candles, for lanterns and lamps, to welcome the dark with their own small circles of light. Elias rested his palm against the cold glass and watched as the snow began to gather on the sill, soft and pure. The town, his small, beloved town, was readying itself unknowingly for a night wrapped entirely in white, for a blizzard that would close the roads and muffle every sound. Yet, in his heart, he felt no fear, only a deep, quiet tenderness, a protective wish that every home would glow warmly, that every soul would feel safe and sheltered. Soon, he would light his first candle and place it in the window, a gentle promise against the deepening dark. All across the town, other hands would do the same, and the night of snow would become a night of soft, shining points, a Christmas Eve held close by candlelight. Evening folded itself gently over the town, as if someone had slowly drawn a soft curtain across the sky. The snow that had begun as faint, delicate flakes now fell more steadily, each flake a tiny, silent star drifting downward in a calm and endless dance. Roofs and chimneys wore a thicker white, and the narrow streets were dressed in a pale, unbroken sheet that softened every sound. Elias stood for a while at his window, watching the silver drift deepen until the shapes of the houses across the lane began to blur at their edges. The glass before him filmed with a quiet lace of frost, starting at the corners and creeping inward in thin, feathered lines, as if winter itself were sketching patient, icy ferns in the fading light. When it grew too dim to see clearly, he stepped back from the window and turned to the small wooden cupboard near his table. Inside, on the middle shelf, lay a neat row of candles, each one carefully saved and wrapped. Some were plain and ivory, others a faint honey color, their surfaces smooth, their wicks waiting. He chose 3, unwrapped them with gentle fingers, and set them in simple brass holders, one for the table, one for the windowsill, and one small, squat candle for the narrow shelf near his bed. Before he struck a match, he paused and listened. The house was quiet, the bookshop below resting in darkness, the shelves and bindings steeped in calm shadow. Outside, the snow whispered softly against the panes, and the wind moved in slow, measured breaths around the corners of the roof. There was a peaceful hush, a sense that the town was holding still, poised at the edge of night. The match flared with a brief, bright hiss in the dim room, then settled into a modest, steady flame as he held it to the first wick. The candle accepted the fire delicately, the wick catching, the wax beginning to soften and glow. Soon, the second and third candles joined it, and the room shifted from gray to gold, the soft light pooling in corners, sliding up the sloped ceiling, touching the beams with a gentle warmth. Shadows moved quietly across the walls, not threatening but familiar, like old companions settling in for the evening. Elias watched the small flames for a moment, their movements slow and peaceful, each one breathing in and out with the hidden rhythm of the air. The light wrapped itself around the edges of his table, lingered on the stack of children's papers, and traced the curve of his chair in a thin silver outline. After a few breaths, Elias took up his hat and scarf again. He had promised himself one more walk through the streets, now that the real dark was coming, to see how the town would begin to glow from within. He left his candles burning, their light a quiet promise waiting for his return, and went downstairs. The bell above the shop door chimed softly when he stepped out, its sound quickly swallowed by the thickening snow. The world outside had changed while he had been upstairs. The snow now lay deeper, smoothing the street into gentle shapes, blurring footprints almost as soon as they were made. The sky was a deep, velvety blue-gray, and the first stars were hidden behind its soft, moving veil. Yet here and there, in the houses along the lane, small, warm lights had begun to appear. The first window he passed belonged to the baker's family. Frost had traced delicate, feathery patterns along the lower panes, but through the clear spaces, he could see a scene of tender, ordinary magic. The baker's wife stood near the stove, her hair loosened from its daytime knot, with a child balanced sleepily on her hip. The child's head rested on her shoulder, one small hand curling in the fabric of her sleeve. At the table, another child sat absorbed in arranging bits of evergreen and dried orange peel into a little ring, a wreath in miniature, concentrating so seriously that their tongue peeked from the corner of their mouth. Candles burned on the table, their flames painting soft halos on the faces of all three. The light seemed to float in the faint mist of steam rising from a pot, turning the air golden and gentle. Elias felt his chest tighten slightly with quiet affection for the scene, like a soft, protective ache. Then he moved on. At the next house, the tailor's, a single tall candle burned in the center of the window, its flame long and still. Behind it, the old man sat with his spectacles low on his nose, needle in hand, taking fine stitches in a piece of dark wool. The room behind him was modest, the furniture plain, but everything was tidy and carefully kept. A pot sat on a small iron stove, and beside it, on a low stool, a tabby cat slept, curled into a perfect circle, its fur rising and falling with each quiet breath. The candlelight shone on the sewing needle as it moved, turning the slender metal into a thread of silver. Each slow, careful stitch was like a tiny act of faith, a quiet persistence in the midst of the growing storm outside. Elias raised a hand in greeting, though he knew the old tailor might not see him through the fogged glass. It was enough to know he was there, wrapped in gentle light. Further along, the widowed music teacher's home glowed softly through two small windows, their glass already rimmed with frost. Inside, she sat at her piano, a modest, upright instrument with a slightly faded finish, and her thin shoulders were wrapped in a shawl. A single candle on the music stand cast its light downward, illuminating the sheet of notes before her and the curve of her hands as they moved over the keys. Elias could not hear the music through the thick glass and the hush of the snow, but he could see the rhythm in the calm movement of her arms, the gentle rise and fall of her fingers. He imagined the sound, slow, peaceful chords, perhaps an old hymn or a simple winter lullaby, filling the small room with a soft, steady comfort. The candle flame bent forward as if listening, then straightened, its tiny golden head swaying slowly to an unheard beat. As he walked, the snow deepened around his boots, and the sky grew darker, folding itself more securely over the town. With each step, more windows came alive. Here, a farmhand's cottage shone with a cluster of stubby candles gathered on a single tray, their flames crowding together, throwing a warm, dancing light over a group of friends sharing bread and cheese. There, a narrow house with a steep staircase glimmered with a single lantern, hung from a central beam, its glass panes fogged with warmth, children's silhouettes moving like gentle shadows on the walls. In one upper window, a pair of hands carefully set a candle into a shallow dish of water, letting it float like a tiny boat of light, the flame's reflection trembling softly on the surface. The frost on the glass grew thicker as the temperature dropped, turning the windows into panels of pale lace. Yet the candles shone through, their small, determined flames unfazed by the cold, glowing as if they held within them a memory of summer sun. Each home's light was different, yet together they formed a chain of softness, a quiet necklace of gold around the neck of the town. Elias moved slowly, not wanting to hurry through this gentle procession. Every window he passed told a story without words, a peaceful, ordinary dream made visible in the soft, silver-touched dark. The storm itself, though quiet, had grown stronger. The snow now came in thick, drifting sheets, slanting slightly under the guidance of a steady wind. The air was full of whiteness, blurring distances, turning the far end of the street into a soft, pale mystery. Sounds were muffled. Even his own footsteps seemed distant and hushed. When he paused and simply listened, he heard only the soft whisper of snow settling, the faint sigh of wind along the roof lines, and, far away, a bell's gentle note as someone closed a door. The world felt wrapped in a deep, calm blanket. The cold was real and firm, but it was not harsh. It was simply present, steady and quiet, a silver counterpoint to the golden hearts of the houses. After making a wide, deliberate circle through the streets, stopping briefly at doorways to exchange a few low words with those who still busied themselves with late chores, Elias turned back toward his own lane. The candles in the windows he had passed earlier were brighter now against the thick, dark outside. Some had multiplied. Families had added more flames as the night deepened, as if strengthening their small circle of light in answer to the growing snow. In the square, he saw a cluster of lanterns for a moment, carried by a few neighbors crossing from one house to another, their pale beams bobbing gently like a group of slow, sleepy fireflies. Then they were gone, swallowed into doorways, leaving the square to the falling snow and the quiet outline of the church at its edge. When he reached the bookshop and climbed the stairs, Elias opened his door to find his own candles waiting, their flames steady and welcoming. The room was transformed. Outside, the snowfall had turned the world into a soft, shifting whiteness. Inside, the small space glowed with tranquil gold. The frost had advanced further on the window pane, leaving only a small, clear oval at the center, like a tiny, polished mirror. Through it, he could see the faint, blurred glimmer of another candle across the street, burning in the window of Mrs. Lindholm's house. The distance between them was small, just a lane's width and a veil of snow, yet it felt meaningful, like a thread of quiet companionship stretching from one light to another. He removed his coat and scarf and placed them carefully on a peg, feeling the warmth begin to return to his fingers and toes. The air in the room was still and peaceful, scented faintly with wax and wood and the lingering trace of lavender from his scarf. He moved his candles with slow, deliberate care, setting one directly on the windowsill so that its gentle flame faced the street. The second he placed at the center of his table, where it could watch over the papers and the simple meal he would share with himself. The third he left near the bed, where its soft, quiet glow would one day guide his thoughts toward rest. As he stepped back and looked at them, he felt a lightness in his chest, a sense of calm that spread through him like warm tea on a cold evening. Outside, the snow continued to fall, closing the town gently in, erasing paths, blurring boundaries, turning the world into a single, soft, silver space. Yet within each home, candles burned with patient, golden light, keeping warm 100 small, peaceful stories. Elias stood at the window for a long, quiet moment, his hand resting against the cool glass, feeling the thin, shimmering distance between the cold night and the soft room. He knew the snow would grow deeper, the wind stronger, that by morning the town might be entirely wrapped and sealed in white. But he also knew that as long as these candles burned, as long as these small flames held their ground against the dark, the night would be kind. The town, his gentle, beloved town, was ready for the storm, not with noise or defiance, but with light, with warmth, with the quiet strength of hearts gathered together by candlelight. Night settled slowly, as if it wished to be kind, as if it understood that the little town needed time to adjust to its deeper shade. The last trace of blue left the sky, replaced by a soft, velvety darkness that held within it the pale glimmer of snow. Outside Elias's window, the flakes no longer drifted in hesitant, scattered patterns. They came now in calm abundance, filling the air from roof to ground with a steady silver descent. Each flake was small and light, yet together they wove a quiet curtain, layer upon layer, until distance disappeared, and the houses across the lane seemed to float in a gentle white haze. The world beyond the town was already slipping away from sight, the forest and fields and far road dissolving into a soft, seamless whiteness. Inside the room above the bookshop, candlelight held its ground with a serene patience. The flame on the windowsill burned with a clear, steady heart, its reflection trembling faintly in the small oval of unfrosted glass. The candle on the table cast a warm circle around Elias, touching the pages, the simple crockery, the worn surface of the wood with a muted gold. Shadows rested like quiet companions in the corners, deep but unthreatening, their shapes softened by the gentle dance of the light. The air was still, broken only by the soft tick of the small clock on the shelf and the faint murmur of wind outside, a low, continuous breath sliding along the eaves. Elias sat at the table, his simple meal finished, his hands folded loosely before him. For a long moment he simply listened, letting the calm sounds of the night sink into him. The town was quieter than he could ever remember it. There was no clatter of carts now, no distant footsteps, no sudden shouts or laughter in the street. The storm had invited everyone indoors, and then slowly, kindly, closed the door behind them. He rose and went to the window, drawing the curtain aside with care, as though not to startle the snow. Cold touched his face immediately, a soft, pure cold that seemed to come not just from the glass, but from the pale, endless space beyond. He leaned closer, his breath clouding lightly against the pane, and gazed out at the night. The lane below had vanished under a smooth, continuous sheet of white, where earlier there had been ruts and footprints, edges of stones, and the lines of the gutter. There was now only a gentle, unbroken surface, curved here and there around buried shapes. Steps, thresholds, and low fences had become soft, rounded forms, as if someone had taken a great, gentle hand and smoothed them. The snow on the rooftops lay thick and even, turning each house into a quiet, white-hooded figure. Chimneys rose from them like dark, thoughtful brows, and from a few, threads of smoke still climbed into the night, twisting slowly before the snow swallowed them. The air between the houses was dense with falling flakes, turning lanterns and candles into small stars surrounded by halos. Elias let his eyes wander from window to window, counting the lights he could see. There, in Mrs. Lindholm's house, 2 candles burned side by side, their flames leaning slightly toward one another, their glow turning the frost on the glass into a delicate lace of gold and silver. In the tailor's cottage, the single tall candle still watched over the old man's work, its narrow flame unwavering, a little guardian of cloth and thread and dreams of warmth. The music teacher's windows shone faintly, the candle on her piano now joined by a second on a shelf, their dual light casting twin reflections on the dark curve of the instrument's polished wood. In a house farther down, where a family with many children lived, several small candles were grouped close together, their flames flickering in gentle conversation as shadows of small heads moved in front of them. As he counted, a feeling of tenderness rose in him, slow and deep, like warm water in a basin. Each candle, he noted, became not just a mark of light, but a little breathing life, a family, a solitary soul, a pair of elderly hands, a sleeping child. He imagined them all inside their rooms, wrapped in blankets, speaking in low voices, or already drifting into quiet dreams. The town, seen this way, from his upper window on such a night, seemed like a cluster of little hearts, each one beating softly behind its frosted veil. Beyond the last house, the world disappeared into snow. Yet here, in this small circle of life, warmth persisted in gentle points of gold. The wind, which had been a soft murmur, now grew more insistent, though never harsh. It flowed through the lanes and around the corners of the houses, carrying with it the faint rustle of snow against wood and stone. Sometimes it rose slightly, a low, sweeping sigh along the rooftops, as if the night were singing a long, slow lullaby over the town. Elias watched as the flakes nearest the window shifted direction for a moment, drawn sideways by the breeze, before resuming their downward path. The blizzard was not a wild, roaring thing here. It was deep and enveloping, but calm. It closed the world not with violence, but with a steady, gentle insistence, like someone drawing a thick, soft curtain to keep out the cold. He rested his hand on the windowsill and felt the faint chill seeping in beneath the frame. The snow piling up just beyond the glass climbed slowly higher along the lower edge, a soft, rising wall. Soon, he knew, the drifts would deepen, perhaps pressing up against doors, perhaps making the streets difficult to cross. But he also knew that the people of the town were used to such winters. They had food stored, blankets folded, wood stacked. They knew how to wait, how to let a storm pass over them like a long, quiet dream. And this night, this particular night, they had something more. The gentle, shared glow of candlelight, the comfort of knowing that behind every small flame was another and another and another. He drew the curtain back into place with a slow, thoughtful motion and turned again to his table. For a while, he paced the short length of the room, his steps soft on the wooden floor, listening to its old, friendly creak. He poured himself a little hot water from the kettle he had kept near the fire, the steam curling upward in pale threads touched by candlelight. The cup warmed his hands, and he stood near the bed, sipping slowly, letting each swallow spread heat through him. His mind wandered gently over the faces of his students, the smallness of their hands as they held pencils, the way their eyes widened when snow first appeared at the windows during lessons. He could imagine them now, bundled under quilts, perhaps asking for one more story, one more song, as the wind whispered outside their walls. After a time, he was drawn back to the window. The room behind him glowed softly, the candlelight gathering itself in quiet pools on floor and ceiling, but it was the outside that called to him the way the snow and night met together. He parted the curtain and leaned forward again, letting his gaze sink into the silver dark world. The snowfall had grown even thicker. The air looked almost solid with it now, a moving, shimmering veil. The nearest street lamp, down by the corner of the lane, shone through the white as a hazy, pale orb, its metal post nearly hidden beneath the drift heaping around its base. The houses opposite were now mere shapes, their details lost, their candles just soft blurs of amber behind quilts of frost. In that moment, the town felt like an island. Beyond its modest cluster of rooftops and chimneys, everything was swallowed by the calm storm. All roads in and out were fading, their traces disappearing under smooth blankets. The distant forest and fields had vanished, the mountains themselves almost erased, their bulk suggested only by faint, dark smudges in the sky. Yet within this island, within this gently closed world, there was no sense of abandonment. There was a quiet safety in the separation, as if the snow had drawn a soft circle around the town and said, "Rest here, just here, in this small, warm place, and let the vast world sleep outside." Elias found himself breathing more slowly, more deeply, as he watched. The steady rhythm of the falling snow seemed to entwine itself with the rhythm of his heart. He counted the lights again, though many were now only hints, small glows behind thick frost. 1, 2, 3 along his lane, then more toward the square, tiny sparks in the white. Each one, he counted, became a silent blessing in his thoughts. May you be warm. May you be safe. May you dream soft dreams. The words were not spoken aloud, but they rested gently in his chest, little wishes sent outward like invisible birds. At last, when his eyes grew tired and the frosted glass cast tiny reflections of his own face back at him, he let the curtain fall once more. The room closed around him in a comfortable glow, the storm now a soft, distant murmur. He moved to the candle near his bed and watched its small flame, the way it rose and bowed, the thin column of melted wax pooling in quiet circles at its base. The bed itself, with its neatly tucked quilts, waited like a still pond of softness in the corner. He did not lie down yet, but he felt the promise of rest drawing nearer, like the slow approach of dawn that would come after the long, silver night. Outside, the snow continued its calm labor, gently, steadily, closing the town into itself. The world beyond was gone for a while, wrapped in quiet and white, but within the little circle of houses and candles and sleeping hearts, everything that truly mattered was present and held. The blizzard was deep, but it was peaceful. It was a vast, silent dream into which the town had been invited. And in his small room above the bookshop, Elias kept his silent watch for a while longer, counting candles, guarding them in his thoughts, and feeling a gentle, protective love spread over his town like another layer of soft, silver snow. The night had deepened into its quiet heart when Elias felt his thoughts turn, as they often did, to the small stone church on the hill and to the man who watched over its clock. The storm had wrapped the town so completely in its soft white folds that the world felt smaller, more intimate, as if every familiar place had drawn closer. In that closeness, he thought of the clock in the bell tower, its hands still making their patient journey around the face, keeping the hours for those who might wake or listen in their dreams. He wondered if the clock's keeper, his old friend Anders, sat alone now in the tower room, with only the tick of the mechanism and the whisper of the snow for company. The thought did not trouble him, but it stirred a quiet wish to share that solitude, to carry a little warmth up the hill. He glanced at the small clock on his shelf and saw that the hour was not yet late, though the storm made it feel as if time had thickened and slowed. The candles in his room burned steadily, their flames unafraid, and the snow at the window pressed up in a growing bank of white. The streets would be deeper now, perhaps more difficult to cross, but the path to the church was not long, and his feet knew every turn. The idea of walking through the muffled, silver-dark town, lantern in hand, appealed to him like a gentle, simple task, a way to move within the quiet instead of only watching it. He put on his coat again, wrapped his scarf more closely about his neck, and drew his hat low over his brow. Before he left, he straightened the candle on the windowsill, as if leaving behind a small watcher in his place, then took up his lantern from its hook near the door. The stair creaked softly under his steps, and the bell above the shop door offered a faint, drowsy chime when he pushed it open. Outside, the storm greeted him with a cool kiss on his cheeks and the soft touch of flakes against his lashes. He paused under the eaves to light his lantern, shielding the match carefully between his hands. The tiny flare felt bright and brave in the whiteness, then gentled as it took hold of the wick. When the lantern's warm glow spread over the snow at his feet, turning the nearest flakes into tiny, shining drops, he stepped out into the lane. The snow reached nearly to the tops of his boots now, but it was light and powdery, parting easily before him with each slow, steady step. The town lay hushed around him, the houses huddled under their thick white roofs, the windows glowing softly through their veils of frost. His lantern cast a moving circle of gold, and beyond it, the world remained silver and gray, indistinct and calm. His breath rose in pale clouds, mingling with the falling snow, and the only sound was the muffled crunch of his steps and the almost inaudible sigh of the wind. It felt to him as if he were walking in the space between waking and dream, a quiet corridor lined with sleeping homes and watching candles. At one window, he caught a glimpse of a rocking chair, moving slowly, a figure cradling a drowsy child. At another, the faint silhouette of someone turning down a lamp, leaving only a single candle burning as a soft guardian of the night. The road to the church wound upward at the edge of the town, curving along the base of the hill. As he reached it, the houses thinned, and the wind met him more freely, flowing down from the white slopes above. It was not a wild wind, but its breath was stronger here, stroking his cloak and nudging his lantern flame inside its glass. The snow on the road was deeper, untouched since the storm had strengthened, and his footprints marked the first new path. Each step was deliberate and unhurried, his boots sinking with a gentle hush, leaving behind a line of soft impressions that the falling flakes soon began to smooth. On either side, the land rose in gentle, rounded shapes, the stone walls and bushes almost entirely hidden under the thick blanket. The world was reduced to simple forms: the glowing circle of his lantern, the silver falling air, the dark line of the church ahead. The church itself emerged from the whiteness like a familiar, patient presence. Its stone walls, usually rough and distinct, were softened now by layers of snow caught in crevices and clinging to ledges. The steep roof wore a smooth cap of white, and the bell tower, square and modest, rose above it like a quiet sentinel. Small drifts had gathered where the wind curled around the corners, and the narrow windows were dim. Yet, at the base of the tower, a faint, flickering glow shone through a slit in the stone. The light from Anders's lamp, steady and low. Elias climbed the short, snow-muffled steps to the heavy wooden door and knocked, his gloved hand making only a dull, soft sound. For a moment, there was no reply, only the sigh of the wind around the tower and the delicate patter of snow against the stone. Then he heard a familiar shuffling within, the scrape of a bolt being drawn, and the door opened a careful span. Anders peered out, his lined face lit from below by the lantern he held. His hair, once dark as coal, was now a soft, drifting white that echoed the snow behind Elias, and his eyes were the steady gray of old stone, warmed by sunlight. "Elias," he said, his voice low and gentle, like a page turning. "You have walked in the storm." "Only up the hill," Elias replied, his breath puffing lightly into the cold air between them. "I thought the clock might like 2 sets of eyes tonight, and you, perhaps, a little company." Anders's expression softened into a smile that touched his whole face, smoothing and deepening the lines at his eyes. He opened the door wider, and a soft wave of warmer air slipped out, carrying with it the smell of oil, metal, and old wood. "Come in, then. The storm will sing just as well to 2 as to 1. Inside, the tower's lower room was small and round, its stone walls darkened by time and many winters' worth of fire and lamp smoke. A narrow staircase clung to the wall, curving upward into the shadows. The lantern Anders had set on a wooden crate cast a mild amber light that reached up along the steps and flickered on the iron rail. The air was cool but sheltered, and the sounds of the storm were softened here, turned into a low, continuous murmur that seemed to circle the tower like a gentle hand. Elias set his own lantern on the floor beside the other, their twin halos overlapping in a warm, quiet glow. "Come," Anders said, already taking up his lantern again. "She is ticking well enough, but I like to hear her breathe on such nights, just to be sure." They began to climb the stairs, their steps slow and measured, the wooden treads creaking softly under their weight. The stone wall brushed Elias's shoulder with a faint chill as they spiraled upward, the sounds of the mechanism gradually becoming clearer. The steady, patient click and whir of gears, the rhythmic pulse of the pendulum's swing. It was a different kind of heartbeat from the quiet thud of his own. It was the heartbeat of hours themselves, passing one by one in calm procession. The clock room, just below the bell, was narrow and high, its walls pierced by the 4 clock faces that watched over the town and its outskirts. Anders set the lantern on a shelf, and its light reached out to touch the metal and wood of the old mechanism. Gears of varying sizes interlocked in a delicate, deliberate dance, their teeth shining dully. The pendulum swung with a slow, dignified grace, left and right, left and right. Its movement accompanied by a quiet, reassuring tick. Against one wall, a small stove glowed softly, its coals banked low, casting a red, breathing light that filled the room with a gentle warmth. Elias moved closer to the clock, watching as Anders laid a careful hand against one of the beams, feeling the faint vibration. "She keeps her patience," Anders said, his voice almost affectionate. "Storms come, storms go, and she walks through them, step by step." He adjusted a small weight, listened intently, then nodded, satisfied. "The town may feel closed tonight," he added, "but time does not close. It moves, gently, even when the snow is deep." Outside, the wind brushed softly against the clock faces, and flakes slid down the glass in thin, transient lines. Through one pane, Elias could see a faint suggestion of the town below, a blur of white and a few soft points of light, like stars that had fallen and decided to rest on the earth. From this height, the candlelit windows looked even more delicate, tiny blossoms of gold in a field of silver. He felt a tender pang, a quiet protectiveness, knowing that each of those small lights marked a life folded in sleep or wakeful waiting. As they stood together in the mild warmth of the clock room, the mechanism's steady ticking wrapped itself around them like a soft metronome. Minutes passed, unhurried, each one slipping gently into the next. Elias and Anders spoke little, their silence a comfortable, companionable thing. When they did speak, their words were simple, drifting along like flakes in the air. A remark about the softness of this snow compared to last year's, a memory of another winter when the roads had vanished and the town had become an island of quiet once more. They spoke also of the children, of lessons and laughter, of how the smallest hands were now learning to read the numbers on the clock's face and listen for its chime. At last, the moment came when the mechanism reached for the hour. Anders straightened slightly, his eyes turning toward the shadows above where the bell waited. The ticking seemed to gather itself, though it did not truly change. Then, with a gentle, practiced motion, the hammers lifted and fell. The bell's voice rang out over the town, not harsh or loud, but full and clear, softened by the snow. Each note flowed outward into the silver night, spreading over rooftops and drifting down chimneys, sinking gently into quilts and pillows and dreams. In distant houses, half-sleeping ears might stir, comforted by this familiar sound, this reminder that the world still turned, that time still moved, that they were not alone within the storm. The last fading echo of the bell mingled with the sigh of the wind, and the clock resumed its quiet, steady pace, as if it had never paused. Elias closed his eyes for a moment and simply listened, feeling the sound settle inside him like a soft stone in a calm pond. "They will hear it," he said, opening them again, "in every room, behind every candle." "Yes," Anders replied. "And perhaps, for a moment, they will know that others are awake, watching the hours with them. That is sometimes enough." They remained there a little while longer, two figures in a small, high room where brass and wood and flame shared the quiet. Then, when the warmth of the stove and the rhythm of the pendulum began to weave a drowsy comfort around them, Elias knew it was time to leave the tower to its watch once more. He thanked Anders with a clasp of the hand, holding it for an extra beat, sharing without words the peace of this shared vigil. Then he took up his lantern and descended the curving stairs, the sound of ticking slowly fading behind him. When he stepped out into the night again, the blizzard greeted him as gently as before. The snow was deep, the world still softly closed, but above him, unseen behind the storm, the bell tower stood, and within it, the clock moved patiently through the hours. As he walked back down the hill toward the nest of rooftops and frosted windows, his lantern casting its small circle of gold, he felt the town wrapped not only in snow, but in time's steady, kind embrace, watched over by a bell that spoke softly to every candlelit room. When Elias descended the hill from the church, the storm met him with the same quiet fullness. Yet he felt less alone within it now. The memory of the clock's steady ticking and the bell's soft voice still rested in his chest, as if he carried a small, invisible metronome of calm within him. His lantern cast its patient circle of light ahead, touching the snow in a gentle glow, while the wind slid around him in slow, silver currents. He had not gone far when he heard, behind him, the careful crunch of another pair of footsteps. Turning, he saw Anders making his way down the path, his own lantern swinging slightly at his side, its light layering softly over Elias's. "I thought I would walk a little way with you," Anders said when he drew near, his breath rising in pale clouds that dissolved into the dark. "The storm is a beautiful companion tonight, and the tower will not mind a brief absence." Elias smiled, a small, warmed curve at the corner of his mouth. "I am glad for the company," he replied. "The town feels like a dream from up there. Perhaps we should see how that dream lies along the river." "The river?" Anders repeated thoughtfully, as if savoring the word. "Yes, I left lanterns there earlier, before the snow thickened. It would be kind to make sure they are still awake." Side by side, they walked through the gentle depth of snow, their lanterns' light overlapping and mingling, turning the falling flakes into tiny, drifting beads of gold as they passed. The houses grew denser again as they reached the lower road, the windows along the way still glowing, though some now showed only the faintest hint of light, half veiled by thick frost and gathering snow on the sills. The town seemed to breathe in a slow, collective rhythm, a soft exhale of warmth from chimneys, a quiet inhale of cold through cracks and keyholes, a shared deep sleep bound together by the storm. The men did not speak much as they walked. Their silence was easy, filled with the gentle sounds of the night and the steady cadence of their steps. Soon, the road curved toward the edge of the town where the river ran, though "ran" was hardly the right word for it now, in this deep winter. For weeks, the water had been locked beneath a thick sheet of ice, its movement slowed and hidden, its surface turned to a long, pale mirror that caught whatever light the sky was willing to offer. In summer, the river had a clear, bright voice and a quick silver body that darted around stones and roots. In winter, it became quiet and still, a sleeping ribbon that lay between the town and the dark silhouettes of distant fields. Tonight, wrapped in snow and shadow, it looked more like a soft band of gray silk beneath the storm. As they approached, the riverbank rose gently before them, its slope smooth and rounded under the snow. The lanterns that Anders had set earlier shimmered into view, faint and dreamlike at first, then growing clearer as the two men came closer. They were simple things, glass-sided lamps with small metal roofs set upon stakes driven into the frozen ground along the edge of the bank. There were not many of them, only a scattered row, but in the white hush of the night, they looked like a procession of tiny, steadfast hearts, their flames bending and then straightening in the touch of the breeze. The snow had gathered on their tops and curled around their bases, half burying the stakes so that the lanterns seemed to grow directly from the drifts. The glass of some was fogged with a thin film of frost, turning the light inside into a soft glow rather than a clear beam. Others shone more brightly where the glass had stayed clear, sending gentle streaks of gold out over the frozen river, where the light was caught and held by the ice, then stretched and blurred into shimmering, elongated shapes. The river reflected the lanterns like a row of softly trembling stars fallen to rest on its surface, each one surrounded by a faint halo of silver where the snowflakes still fell. Elias and Anders moved slowly along the line, their lanterns adding to the patchwork of light. At each small lamp, they paused briefly. Anders brushed away the snow that had gathered on the roofs and sides with his gloved hand, revealing the quiet glow within. If a flame had grown too low, he opened the little door carefully and coaxed it with a practiced touch, tilting the wick a fraction, feeding it with a breath of air until it rose again, steady and relieved. The air that escaped when he opened a lantern was warmer and scented faintly with oil and singed metal, mingling with the cold, clean smell of snow and ice. The river at their side lay utterly still, its surface a soft, dimpled white where snow had piled, broken only here and there where the wind had swept a patch clear to reveal the glassy ice beneath. In those clear places, the lantern's reflections were sharp, slender streaks, trembling slightly with the faintest movement of the air. Above, the sky remained veiled, the stars hidden behind the thick, moving clouds. But their absence did not feel lonely. It was as if the lanterns had accepted the task of shining in their place for the night, holding a quiet, borrowed starlight close to the earth. "Do you remember?" Anders said, his voice soft enough that it seemed to blend with the river's silence. "The winter when we were boys, and the river did not freeze until late. The ice came thin and fragile, and we were told to stay far from the bank." "I remember," Elias answered, watching a lantern's flame lean briefly toward the glass before settling upright again. "We stood under the bare trees and listened to the water knocking at the ice from below. It made a sound like distant bells, muffled and bright." "The river is quieter now," Anders murmured. "Perhaps it is dreaming under all that ice, dreaming of thaw and long days of silver light." Elias let his gaze travel along the frozen length, following the route he knew so well in other seasons. The gentle bend near the mill, the place where children liked to paddle in summer, the curve where reeds grew tall and green. The snow had softened all these, turning the familiar line into a simple, peaceful sweep. "It will wake when it is ready," he said. "For now, it rests, and we keep watch with our little lights." They walked on, tending to the remaining lanterns. The wind, though low, made its presence known in subtle ways. A small, sudden whirl of flakes around their feet, a soft brushing sound as snow slid lightly from an overburdened branch onto the drift below, a momentary shiver in the flames that then calmed, as if soothed by their own persistence. Beyond the river, dark outlines suggested the distant trees and fence posts, softened by the storm until they seemed more painted shadows than solid things. The lanterns on the bank, in contrast, were warm and immediate, beads of gold threaded along the river's edge, marking the boundary between the sleeping water and the sleeping town. For a while, they stood together at the widest point, where the river broadened before narrowing again downstream. Here, the ice reflected not only the lanterns, but also, faintly, the vague, dim light of the snow-clouded sky. The surface seemed to hold layers of brightness, a pale, invisible silver from above, the deeper honeyed gold of the lamps at its margin, and beneath that, hidden in darkness, the memory of flowing water. The sight invited stillness. Elias and Anders fell quiet, each immersed in his own gentle thoughts, sharing the silence like a soft cloak. "It is like a path," Elias said at last, his voice lower than the wind, scarcely more than a breath. A quiet path of light along the edge of the night. Anders nodded slowly. If someone were wandering out there in the storm, he answered, they might see this glow and know the town is near. Even if the roads are gone, the river would guide them, and the lanterns would say, you are not lost. Come this way. There is warmth beyond this white. The idea warmed Elias, though he knew that, on such a night, everyone was already safely within. Still, he liked to think of the lanterns speaking in that gentle, reassuring language of light, a language that needed no words. They are small guardians, he said, each flame watching, each reflection holding its own little dream. They remained until their cheeks grew pleasantly cold and their lashes silvered with a fine dusting of snow. Then, with one last look along the river, they turned back toward the town. As they walked away, the lanterns at their backs glowed on, their light thinning and blending into the silver air until it became merely a soft suggestion, a feeling rather than a sight. Yet Elias knew that if he stopped and turned, those dots of warmth would still be there, standing patiently over the sleeping river, their flames rising and falling in their slow, peaceful breaths. The road into the town greeted them with familiar shapes. The curve of a wall under its snow cover, the slope of a roof, the kind tilt of a chimney. Candlelit windows reappeared, each one a small, welcoming eye in the white face of the night. The river slipped quietly out of view behind them, but its calm presence lingered in Elias's mind like a quiet melody. The frozen water, the gentle lanterns, the silver sky, all these wove together into a single, continuous hush. By the time Elias and Anders reached the place where their paths parted, the town felt even more deeply at rest. They exchanged a few soft words, a wish for a peaceful night and warm dreams. Then each lifted his lantern slightly in farewell, their lights briefly crossing like two fireflies greeting in the dark. Anders turned back uphill toward the tower, that small keeper of time, while Elias walked toward the bookshop and his waiting candles. Behind him, unseen but not forgotten, the lanterns over the frozen river kept their gentle watch, laying their golden touch upon the silver ice, marking the edge of the town with a quiet corridor of light where earth, water, and sky met in a single, soft, dreaming line. When Elias reached the lane of the bookshop again, the night had grown deeper and more settled, as if the storm had found its true rhythm. The snow still fell, but the flakes seemed larger now, drifting in slower, more measured patterns, turning and circling as they descended. The air felt slightly lighter against his face, the wind calmer, its earlier sighs stretching into longer, quieter breaths. The town lay beneath a thick, soft covering of white, its shapes simple and gentle, its sounds almost entirely hushed. Lantern in hand, he stood a moment at the corner, listening to the quiet as it enfolded him like a soft mantle. The windows he passed on his way home shone more faintly now, some reduced to a single patient candle, others darkened as families slipped fully into sleep. Frost had claimed almost every pane, its delicate patterns woven into dense, icy ferns and blossoms, so that the light within reached the street as a muted amber haze rather than a clear glow. The houses seemed to be dreaming too, their roofs round with snow, their chimneys breathing slowly, their doors closed in a peaceful, protective way. Elias moved through the silver-laden air with unhurried steps, his boots leaving deep, soft impressions that filled almost at once with fresh flakes. It felt less like walking through a town than moving through the heart of some gentle winter dream. At his own door, the bell above the shop offered its small, familiar note, the chime quickly swallowed by the quiet. Inside, the staircase greeted him with its friendly creak, and when he reached his room, the sight that met him was one of calm, welcoming light. The candles he had left burning glowed steadily, their flames smaller now, their wicks shortened by the patient passage of hours, yet they still held their gentle strength. The air in the room was pleasantly warm, tinged with the mild scents of wax and old wood. He set his lantern on the floor, extinguished its flame with a careful breath, and then moved to the window, drawn once more to the world beyond the frosted glass. The curtain, when he touched it, felt cool, as if it had absorbed the nearness of the snow outside. He drew it aside with care, and the pane before him revealed the familiar oval of clear glass he had kept with his earlier watch. Frost crowded around its edges, feathering inward like silver wings. But in the center, a small, clean circle remained, a tiny eye through which the night could be seen. Beyond, the lane lay in a deep, velvety whiteness. The snow had risen higher on the sills, soft banks pressing up against the lower edges of the windows across the way. Roof lines were softened, corners blurred, steps nearly erased. For a long moment, Elias simply looked, letting the gentle, quiet scene settle into him. The slow fall of flakes, the dim glow of a few distant candles, the delicate shift of shadow where the wind moved. Yet as he gazed, he noticed something new at the upper edge of the world. The sky, which had been all one dense, moving gray, now showed a slight change. The color near the horizon had grown a shade paler, touched at its furthest reach by a faint whisper of light. The snow clouds, though still thick overhead, seemed at their edges to be thinning, fraying into lighter, more transparent veils. He watched as a subtle widening occurred in that paler band, like a seam loosening in heavy cloth. It was not sudden, not sharp, but slow and gradual, as if the sky itself were taking a long, deep breath. He felt a gentle stirring in his chest, a quiet sense of expectation that surprised him by its tenderness. It was a feeling he remembered from childhood winters, when he would stare for long minutes at a clouded sky and ask in his heart for just one star to appear. It was a feeling like waiting for a kindly face to lean out from behind a curtain, or for a friendly hand to part branches in a dark wood. Without quite knowing why, Elias leaned closer to the glass, his breath feathering it with a thin mist that quickly faded, his eyes searching the pale gap in the clouds with soft, patient hope. The minutes slipped by in a gentle procession, measured invisibly by the distant, steady ticking of the church clock on the hill. The snow continued to fall, but its density lessened in small, almost imperceptible degrees, as if the storm were growing sleepier. The clouds above the town loosened their weave, leaving, here and there, a darker thread of sky between them. At first, these threads were too faint to distinguish clearly, mere hints of a deeper shade beyond the gray. Then one widened slightly, its border outlined with a subtle, silver brightness, as if moonlight, long hidden, were touching the edges from behind. Across the lane, in a narrow house with a low roof, a curtain stirred. A small figure, perhaps a child, drew it back and pressed a face to the window, leaving a brief round patch in the frost. For a few moments, that face, half lost behind the mist of its own breath, also peered upward into the sky. Elias felt a quiet companionship in that shared gesture, two pairs of eyes following the same slow opening above the snow. Somewhere farther down the street, the door of a house opened for an instant, spilling a soft puddle of candlelight onto the white steps before closing again. A shadow moved past a different window, pausing, turning toward the heavens. It seemed that the town, though wrapped in sleep, contained here and there small islands of wakefulness, souls who sensed, without words, that something gentle was changing above them. Then, as if in answer to all those silent upward glances, the cloud seam parted just a little more, and in the gap revealed, a single, clear star appeared. It was not large, not blindingly bright, but its light was steady and pure, like a small, luminous stone resting on a riverbed of velvet night. It hung above the town in a calm, unwavering way, its silver glow softened only slightly by the thin veils of remaining cloud. The sight of it, emerging from so much grayness, brought a quiet easing to Elias's heart, a sense of something gentle and reassuring settling in its proper place. He watched it in silence, feeling the room behind him grow even more peaceful, as if the star's presence outside had somehow deepened the calm within. The falling snow, caught now in that distant, silver gleam, seemed to shimmer more softly. Each flake, as it passed through the invisible cone of starlight, picked up a brief glint, a tiny flash, before it joined the rest upon the town. The whiteness on the roofs and streets, touched by the star's faint radiance, took on a quiet, glistening sheen, like cloth dusted lightly with crushed pearls. The candle in his own window responded too, its flame appearing to glow a little more gently, as though it recognized a subtle kinship with the light above. Across the lane, the child at the window still watched, their small face tilted upward, motionless in wonder. Behind them, a taller figure joined, placing a hand upon the child's shoulder. In other houses, curtains were pulled back, just a finger's width or two, enough to let a pair of eyes find the star. Somewhere, perhaps, an elderly woman sitting alone in a rocking chair might pause in her quiet knitting and look up at the glow spilling through the frosted glass, understanding, without seeing directly, that the sky had opened. The music teacher's fingers might rest on still keys as she turned her gaze from the gently flickering candle on her piano to the thin ribbon of starlight, now tracing itself along the upper edge of her window frame. The star seemed to hover not only over the town, but over each home. Its light, though small, spread with a calm, even generosity, falling equally upon the roofs of the wealthy and the humble, upon the bell tower and the bookshop, upon the frozen river and the snow-buried fields beyond. It felt, to Elias, less like a distant flame than a soft hand extended from the high reaches of the sky, resting in blessing on the white curve of the hill, on the quiet square, on the lanterns along the riverbank. The world beyond the town's circle remained hidden in cloud and snow, but within that circle, the star and the candles and lanterns seemed to answer one another in a gentle, wordless harmony of light. Elias found that his thoughts had slowed to the same quiet tempo as the snow, as the ticking clock, as the careful rise and fall of the star's shimmer. No anxious questions came, no sharp memories, no restless wishes. Instead, he felt only a broad, soft feeling that might have been gratitude, or might simply have been a deep release, like a long-held breath finally exhaled. He thought of the children, safe under quilts, perhaps dreaming of sleigh bells or of mysterious gifts left at doorways. He thought of Anders, up in the tower, perhaps glancing through one of the frosted clock faces and catching that same point of silver above the storm. He thought of the lanterns over the frozen river and imagined their reflections of gold, now joined by a faint, coiling trace of starlight on the ice. For a while, he kept his hand against the glass, feeling the faint chill pressing back through it, anchoring him gently to the reality of the night. The star did not move hurriedly. It seemed content to simply be, to shine its soft and peaceful light over the snow-wrapped world. If clouds drifted near, they only brushed its edges, never fully covering it, as if the sky itself had decided to leave this one clear window open. Time slipped quietly onward. Somewhere, the bell on the hill spoke another hour in its softened voice, the notes drifting down like slow, silver petals to rest on roofs and dreams. At last, when his eyes grew heavy and the candle near his bed had melted into a low, steady pool of light, Elias let the curtain fall gently back over the pane. The image of the star remained in his mind, bright and calm, as if it had imprinted itself on the soft darkness behind his closed lids. The small room felt even more secure now, as though the walls, the beams, and the very air held a quiet assurance that all was well. He moved through the familiar motions of preparing for rest with unhurried care, each gesture smooth and simple. The bed awaited him with its folded quilts and soft pillow, a small harbor within the larger harbor of the town. Before he lay down, he glanced once more at the candle on the windowsill. Its flame trembled, then steadied, casting a last, tender glow across the room. In his thoughts, he imagined it speaking to the star outside, a small, earthbound light answering a distant skyborn one. Together, they watched over the town, the star from above, silent and silver, the candles and lanterns from within, warm and golden. Between them, like a gentle bridge, lay the falling snow, soft and quiet, wrapping every roof, every path, every sleeping heart in a deep, peaceful dream. With that thought resting softly upon him, Elias lay down and let his eyes close. The star that had waited behind the clouds now shone above the blizzard. Christmas of 1882, its light reaching into every shadow, every corner, every quiet room. And as the wind whispered around the eaves and the snow settled in deeper silence, the little town slept under that calm, silver gaze, held tenderly in the soft, protective cradle of the night. Sleep did not come all at once to Elias, but drifted around him in soft, slow circles, as if it too were a kind of snow. He lay with his eyes closed, feeling the gentle warmth of his quilts and the deeper warmth of the room, listening to the faint murmur of the storm beyond the walls. The image of the star above the clouds rested still in his thoughts, a small, steady point that soothed him each time his mind brushed against it. For a while, he floated in that twilight realm between waking and dreaming, where sounds are felt more than heard and time loosens its edges. Then, somewhere in that softness, another sound began to reach him. Very faint at first, so delicate that it might have been only a dream of sound. The hint of a melody, the suggestion of voices carried along the quiet air. He opened his eyes slowly, unsure whether he had truly heard anything or whether the bell's last echo and the whisper of the wind had woven themselves into imagined song. The room was dimmer now. The candle near his bed had burned low, its flame a small, golden bead nestled in a shallow pool of wax. A pale glow, almost imperceptible, seemed to seep through the gap in the curtain, a reflection of the star that still kept watch beyond the clouds. The sound came again, a little clearer, a thread of tone that rose and fell gently, as if someone far away were humming a lullaby to the night. It was not loud or insistent. It was more like the murmuring of a stream under ice, or the memory of music heard long ago. Elias lay very still, listening. The sound grew a little stronger, not because the voices themselves had become louder, but because his attention had reached out to meet them, opening like a hand toward their source. He could distinguish now more than one voice, perhaps 3 or 4, blending in a soft chorus. The melody was simple, the kind of carol that children learn easily and elders carry in their hearts, the notes rising in gentle arcs and falling back again with the comforting regularity of breath. The words were indistinct through the walls, but their feeling was clear, a song of peace, of blessing, of light held softly in dark places. It seemed to him that the voices were coming from the direction of the square, where the church and the clustered houses gathered around the well. Something in the tenderness of that distant singing called to him, not with urgency, but with a quiet invitation. He felt no reluctance to leave his bed, only a mild, pleasant weight in his limbs, like the last dregs of sleep that could be shaken off with care. After a moment, he sat up, his movements slow so as not to disturb the deep stillness of the room. The floor met his feet with its familiar coolness, reminding him that the world beyond the quilts was real and waiting. He dressed again in his coat and scarf, smoothing the wool as if it were a living thing that had kept him company through many winters. The candle by his bed flickered when he passed, and he shielded it briefly with his hand, whispering almost under his breath, as though thanking it for its watch. Down the narrow stairs he went, each step measured, each creak softened by the heavy hush that lay over the town. He did not light his lantern this time. The snow outside and the faint glow from many windows would be enough. When he opened the shop door, a wave of clean, cold air flowed in, tinged with the faint scent of pine from the forests and the metallic whisper of frost. He stepped out into it, let the door close quietly at his back, and stood a moment under the eaves. The storm had gentled considerably. The snow still fell, but in lighter, slower flurries, each flake turning lazily in the air before settling onto the deep, soft mantle that now reached nearly to his calves. The sky above was no longer a uniform gray. Here and there, darker, clearer patches showed, and through one of them, the same solitary star shone, steady and silver. The music reached him more clearly now. It drifted from the square in gentle waves, a handful of voices weaving their notes together, rising, falling, then resting before beginning again. The sound glided along the snow-covered roofs, slipped around chimneys, and slid softly down into the lanes. It had a warmth that did not melt the snow, but seemed instead to seep into it, turning the white into something softer, friendlier. As if the very drifts were listening, Elias began to walk toward the source, his steps leaving deep, slow footprints, the snow embracing his boots with each movement. The town, half dreaming, did not resist his passage. It merely sighed around him, the wind now no more than a quiet companion. When he reached the mouth of the lane that opened onto the square, he paused, taking in the scene before him. The square was not large, just a modest open space between the church, the well, and a ring of houses. But under the blizzard's gentle touch, it seemed larger, made more spacious by the blank, soft ground and the delicate halo of falling flakes. At its center stood a small cluster of people, wrapped in coats and shawls, their shoulders dusted with silver. They held lanterns and candles in their gloved hands, the flames casting small, warm spheres of light that overlapped and mingled, painting their faces in gentle gold. The snow around their feet was disturbed by footprints, but had already begun to soften again, smoothing the edges, as if the night itself wished to keep their gathering tender and unbroken. The voices came from them, from this little circle of light. A few grown men and women, a couple of older children, and perhaps one or two elders stood close together, their breaths rising in pale clouds that mingled with the music. Their song was unhurried, the tempo slow, as if each note were a step taken carefully through a dream. They sang of night and stars, of a child in a stable, of angels whose wings were made of quiet light rather than fire. The melody wound between them like a soft ribbon, and the harmonies, though simple, rested sweetly against one another, like hands folded in prayer. Above their heads, the star shone, small and clear in its patch of open sky, and the snow caught the lantern glow and scattered it gently. Elias did not hurry to join them. He stood first at the edge, content to listen, to feel the song wrap around him at a distance. The church loomed quietly at the square's side, its bell tower a dark, familiar shape. From one of its upper windows, a faint line of light showed, suggesting that Anders, too, might be listening. Up among the gears and the slow, patient pendulum, the houses nearby had drawn back their curtains a little, and in more than one window, a face could be seen in silhouette, watching, perhaps humming along under the breath. No one spoke over the music. No voice broke the gentle thread. The song seemed to spin a soft circle that held them all, both those in the square and those watching from their warm rooms. After a time, someone noticed Elias standing near the edge of the square, his figure half hidden in the soft fall of snow. One of the singers, Mrs. Lindholm, lifted a hand slightly, inviting him closer with a small, welcoming gesture. Her candle burned steadily in her other hand, its wax dripping slowly down the side in quiet, translucent tears. Elias stepped forward, drawn not only by the gesture, but by the warmth of being included in this small, wakeful island of voices. As he approached, the circle opened a little, making space without fuss or question. He took his place among them, between the tailor and the music teacher, who still wore her shawl and whose cheeks were pink from the cold. The song changed, almost without pause, into another tune, one he knew well from childhood. It was a carol of simple blessings, its words speaking of peace over fields and forests, of calm over houses, of deep, gentle rest granted to every heart. Elias added his voice to the others, quietly at first, then steadily. He was not a strong singer, but his tone was even and soft, merging easily with the rest. He did not try to stand out. He let his notes be part of the woven whole, as a single thread belongs to the cloth. As they sang, the flames of the candles and lanterns swayed in the faint breath of their words, the air stirred by song, causing the light itself to dance. Each flame leaned forward a little with the rising notes, then straightened as the melody settled, painting small, moving patterns on the snow at their feet. The longer they sang, the more the square seemed to be transformed. The high snowbanks at its edges, lit by the combined glow of flames, took on soft golden shadows, as if lit from within. The church's stone facade caught the light in gentle strokes, making its rough surface appear smooth, almost velvety. The snowflakes, drifting endlessly down, caught and released the light as they passed, so that the air around the singers shimmered faintly, like water touched by moonlight. It was as if the very night had become a wide, quiet instrument, and their voices, together with their candles, played upon it with a calm, loving hand. Between songs, they rested in silence, their breaths visible, their faces relaxed. No one suggested that they stop. No one asked how long they would stay. Time, marked only by the distant, softened ticking of the clock and the slow burn of the candles, seemed less important here. The night was deep, the snow thick, the road beyond the town closed by gentle drifts, but the square itself felt open and bright, a kind of sheltered clearing within the storm. A child nestled closer to her father's side, her small, mittened hand tucked into his larger one, her head leaning drowsily against his coat as she listened. An elderly man, his beard laid with snow, hummed more than he sang now, yet his eyes shone with quiet contentment. Eventually, the carols grew still softer, as if even the songs were becoming sleepy. Voices that had been clear grew hushed and low, yet no less sure. One final melody, slow and simple as a lullaby, rose into the air, a wishing song, asking gently for good rest, for warm homes, for dreams that were light and kind. Elias felt each word settle into him with the familiarity of a well-worn prayer, not sharp or insistent, but like the soft touch of a hand on his shoulder. When the last note faded, it did not vanish abruptly. It seemed to rest in the air for a moment, blending with the sigh of the wind and the faint whisper of falling snow, before dispersing quietly over the rooftops. No one clapped. There was no need. Instead, they simply stood for another long breath, sharing the silence they had helped to deepen. Then, little by little, people began to turn toward home. Candles and lanterns were lifted, their flames shielded against the breeze, as the small circle unfolded and stretched into a few gentle lines moving outward along the snow-softened streets. Soft goodnights were exchanged in low voices, smiles were traded, shoulders were touched lightly in passing. The square emptied, but it did not feel empty. It held the memory of the songs like a lingering warmth, a quiet echo that would remain even after all the footprints were filled in by new snow. Elias walked back to the bookshop alone, his heart calm, his steps unhurried. The music still hummed within him, a gentle thread that would not easily break. Above, the stars shone, patient and serene, its light mingling with the last glows of candles in window after window. It seemed to him that the songs they had sung were now woven into that light, carried in it like a soft, invisible scarf wrapped around the town. When he reached his room once more and lay down in his waiting bed, the images came easily. Silver, snow, golden flames, quiet faces, and voices rising and falling in slow, peaceful arcs. With those images resting softly over him, he closed his eyes and slipped, at last, into a deep and gentle sleep. While outside the night continued its calm, white song over the small town's Christmas by candlelight, the night moved onward in its quiet, unhurried way, and the town sank deeper into its soft, silver rest. After the songs in the square, after the last lanterns had turned down their streets and the murmured farewells had faded into the hush, the world seemed almost completely still. Snow continued to fall in fine, steady veils, tender as breath, patient as time. The star above the clouds held its small, steady light, as if watching gently over each sleeping roof. Within this deep calm, Elias slept for a while in his narrow bed above the bookshop, wrapped in quilts that held the faint scents of sun-dried linen and pine chests, lulled by the lingering memory of carols and candle flames. Yet sleep, like the snow itself, can ebb and flow. Sometime near the heart of the night, when even the busiest fires had burned down to embers and the streets lay in their quietest silence, Elias woke. It was not an abrupt waking, not the kind that comes from a loud sound or a sharp dream, but a slow rising to the surface, like a leaf drifting upward through clear water. His eyes opened into a darkness that was not complete, for the last of his candles still burned on the little shelf by the bed, its flame low and thoughtful, casting soft, crouching shadows on the ceiling beams. For a moment, he lay still, listening, feeling the depth of the hour, sensing in the stillness that this was a time apart, a gentle hollow carved out of the long winter night. A quiet impulse stirred in him, light as a snowflake alighting on a sleeve. It was not a thought exactly, more a feeling that there was one more place he must visit before the night was finished, one more corner of the town's small world whose silence he wished to share. His mind moved to the back of the bookshop, to the concealed gate that opened into the narrow courtyard garden behind the building. In the busier months, that garden was a secret pocket of green, a place of herbs and low flowers, of ivy and an old stone bench. In winter, it often lay undisturbed for days, visited only by birds and the quiet drift of snow. Tonight, under this deep, unbroken fall, he felt that it would have become a hidden world, a small, secret universe asleep in the heart of the town. Slowly, with a care that did not disturb the soft weight of the hour, Elias rose. He dressed again, his movements practiced and unhurried, pulling on his thick coat, smoothing the edges where it crossed over his chest, wrapping his scarf in a gentle loop around his neck. The candle by his bed flickered as he moved past, and he cupped his hand around it for a moment, considering whether to let it burn or to carry another with him. The thought of a single small flame in the snowy garden called to him, a quiet center around which the white world could gather. He chose one of his remaining candles, a simple, pale one, and held it carefully in his hand. With his other hand, he took up a small metal holder, tucking them both to his chest as he descended the stairs. The shop below was a shadowed sea of shelves and sleeping books, their spines dull glints in the faint spill of light from the stairwell. He moved between them like a boat, sliding silently along a darkened river, guided more by familiarity than by sight. At the far end of the shop, a narrow door led to the back, its wooden surface cool and smooth under his palm. Beyond that, another door opened into a short, enclosed corridor that led to the courtyard gate. Before he stepped out, he lit the candle he carried, shielding the match with his fingers until the flame steadied, a small, brave point of gold in the dimness. The candle's light softened the shapes around him, turning the rough boards of the walls into gentle planes, the iron latch of the gate into a thin, silver line. When he pushed the gate open, a soft weight pressed against it. Snow piled high in the small, sheltered space beyond. The night greeted him with a cool breath, tinged with the scent of fresh snow and the faint, distant echo of the forest. He stepped out into the courtyard and felt the snow close around his boots in a deep, hushed embrace, higher here than in the street, untouched by any passage. The candle in his hand flickered, then steadied, its little flame casting a golden circle around him and revealing, slowly, the transformed garden. The space, bordered by the rear walls of the bookshop and neighboring houses, was not large, but under the snow and starlight, it seemed to open and unfold, like a page in a book, revealing a hidden illustration. The low stone wall at the back had become a smooth, white ridge, soft and rounded, its roughness erased by the patient fall of snow. The small beds where herbs and flowers grew in warmer seasons were buried, their shapes suggested only by gentle undulations, like sleeping forms resting beneath a blanket. The old stone bench, where he sometimes sat in summer evenings, had been turned into a white, curved mound, its seat and back merged into a single, graceful line. A thin tree in the corner, whose leaves had long since fallen, now wore a delicate, lace-like mantle of snow, every branch outlined in silver white, each twig holding its own tiny, quiet burden. Above, the sky over the enclosed space was deeper and more clearly visible than in the narrow lane. The clouds had drawn further apart, leaving wider avenues of dark, velvet sky between their soft, moving shapes. The solitary star still shone, though now it was joined by one or two fainter companions, as if the night had grown comfortable enough to show a little more of its face. Their light, filtered through the thinning veil of snow, fell softly into the courtyard, mingling with the candle's gold to produce a quiet, muted radiance. The snow on the ground and on the bench caught this light and gave it back in a gentle, silvery shimmer, as if the garden itself were breathing it in and out. Elias closed the gate behind him, letting it rest lightly on its latch, and moved toward the center of the courtyard. Here, the snow was perfectly smooth, untouched, a small field of unbroken white. He paused for a moment on the edge of it, reluctant to disturb such purity, but the notion of a single, small flame in the midst of this secret world invited him onward. With slow, respectful steps, he walked to the middle, his boots sinking with a soft, muffled sound, leaving a simple pattern of prints behind him. When he reached the center, he set the metal holder gently upon the snow, pressing it down just enough to sit securely. Then he placed the candle inside it and drew his hand away. The flame, no longer jostled, rose into a steady, slender tongue of light. Its glow spread outward in a small, luminous pool, bathing the nearest snow in warm gold. The surface of the white, touched by this warmth, took on subtle shades, pale honey near the candle, then gentle cream, then back to cool silver at the edges of the light. The shadows it cast were soft and rounded, as if every edge in the courtyard had grown kinder. The tree's lacework branches held tiny beads of gold, where the light caught on ridges of snow. The stone bench, half in light and half in shade, seemed both real and dreamlike, a place that might support a resting body or vanish at a touch. Elias stood beside the candle, breathing slowly. The garden felt apart from the rest of the town, as if it were its own quiet pocket of night. Yet he knew that just beyond the walls lay other rooms, other sleepers, other candles, burning low. The wind moved more gently here, turned aside by the walls into a soft, circular flow that brushed his coat and toyed delicately with the flame, making it bow and rise again in a slow, peaceful rhythm. Snow fell into the space from above, but more sparsely than in the open street. Each flake drifted downward like a tiny, silvery feather, some melting almost at once as they passed through the warm air near the candle, others coming to rest in a fine, sparkling dust over the deep drifts. He felt, in that moment, an almost childlike sense of wonder, as if he had stumbled upon a secret chamber in a familiar house. This was the same courtyard where he had sat with a cup of tea in summer, watching bees move from blossom to blossom, where children had once played among potted herbs, where a neighbor had tied ribbons to the little tree for a spring celebration. Yet now, under the soft rule of snow and starlight, it was a quiet, enchanted place, a small sanctuary that seemed to exist only for this single night. It felt to him that all the noise and rush of the wider world had been gently set aside, leaving only this white, light breath and a deep, surrounding silence. He lowered himself carefully onto the edge of the snow-covered bench, feeling the cold through the layers of his coat, but not in a harsh way. It grounded him, kept him aware of his body, of the present moment, even as his mind floated in the soft expanses of his thoughts. From this low vantage, the candle's flame appeared almost at eye level, its small core of brightness drawing his gaze. He watched it as if it were the only light on earth. Its slow movements, the delicate halo that surrounded it, the way it seemed both fragile and enduring. In its quiet persistence, he saw something of the town itself on this night, small, tender, held in the vastness of snow and sky, yet steady, loving, alight. Sitting there, he let his thoughts stretch outward to the people sleeping not far away, to Mrs. Lindholm, breathing gently in her narrow bed, a woolen blanket pulled to her chin, to the tailor, his hands finally still, his needle resting beside a half-finished seam, to the music teacher, her piano closed, her shawl folded, her last chord still faintly echoing in her dreams, to the children, curled like nests of warmth beneath quilts, their faces turned toward hidden dreams of stars and songs and secret gardens of their own. He thought of Anders in the clock tower, perhaps dozing in his chair, the mechanism's steady, ticking a constant, soft companion. Over each of them, he imagined a small, invisible flame, like the one before him, burning quietly, guarding them from whatever chill or shadow might still linger at the edges of the night. Without speaking aloud, he framed a simple wish in his heart. It was not elaborate, not made of many words. It was a wish for gentleness, for each soul within the town to be wrapped, tonight and in nights to come, in the same soft, loving silence that filled this courtyard. He wished that every fear might be eased, every worry softened, if only for a little while, by the calm touch of snow and starlight and candle glow. He wished that those who carried hidden burdens might feel them lightened, that those who felt alone might sense, in some quiet corner of their being, that they were held within a circle of shared light. The candle flickered once, as if responding, then steadied again. The snow around it continued to receive its glow with patient grace. Time, if it passed at all, did so like the snowflakes. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, each minute settling lightly onto the next, until a soft drift of moments lay behind him. The star above watched on, the town slept, the garden breathed its secret, silvery breath. Elias remained for as long as his body was comfortable in the cold, letting the stillness soak through him, smoothing the last small tangles of wakefulness from his mind. At last, when his fingers had grown pleasantly numb and his lashes were outlined with a fine frost, he rose. He did not extinguish the candle, It felt right to leave it there, a gentle heart of light beating in the center of the secret garden while he returned to his bed. He stepped back through the snow, retracing his prints, leaving the little flame behind him as a quiet guardian of the night. The gate closed with a soft, muffled click, and the courtyard was hidden once more, a small world of white and gold resting behind the walls. Inside the bookshop, the air felt warmer, thicker with the scent of paper and wood. He moved through the darkened shelves with a slower, dreamier step, climbed the stairs, and returned to his room, where the last of his earlier candle still glowed faintly, like an old friend who had waited up. As he lay down and pulled the quilts around him again, the image of the secret garden remained vivid. The snow, the branches, the single, steadfast flame under the watching star. With that image resting gently over his thoughts, he sank at last into a deep, peaceful sleep. While outside, in the hidden courtyard, the candle burned quietly on a small, golden promise in the heart of the silver night. Dawn came slowly, as if it did not wish to disturb the deep, soft sleep that had settled over the town. The long winter night loosened its hold by degrees, letting go first at the far edges of the sky, where a pale, uncertain light began to gather behind the mountains. It was not yet the light of day, but rather a gentle thinning of the dark, a quiet suggestion that morning was somewhere on its way. Over the snowbound roofs and the silent chimneys, the sky shifted from velvety black to a deep, muted blue, like ink diluted with water, and then to a calm, pearly gray. The clouds, which had spent the night drifting and folding themselves around the town, grew more transparent, their undersides tinged with a faint, delicate rose. The snow, which had fallen in such patient abundance through the night, lay in a smooth, uninterrupted expanse over everything. Rooftops were softened into rounded shapes, gutters and railings completely hidden, doorsteps curved into gentle slopes, and narrow lanes filled almost to their edges. The town seemed carved from a single piece of white marble, yet the snow gave it not the hardness of stone, but the softness of wool. Here and there, where eaves had shed their burden, or where the smallest stir of air had brushed the surface, there were subtle ripples and dimples, but for the most part, the snow lay still and perfect, its surface broken only by the faint traces of earlier paths, now half filled and smoothed by fresh flakes. The lanterns along the frozen river had burned low, some extinguished entirely, leaving only small, dark shapes half buried near the bank, while others still cradled embers that glowed like sleeping fireflies beneath their frosted glass. Above this silent scene, the star that had watched over the town during the night began to fade gently, not vanishing all at once, but softening its light as the sky slowly brightened. It seemed to withdraw with tenderness, as if it knew its work was done for now, leaving the town not abandoned, but simply entrusted to a different kind of light. The remaining stars, faint and few, followed suit, until the sky held only the complex, shifting hues of early dawn. The clouds that remained stretched in thin, feathery layers across the mountains, their edges brushed with the palest gold. Behind them, the unseen sun moved closer to the horizon, still hidden, yet already touching the upper air with a silent promise of warmth. In his small room above the bookshop, Elias slept deeply, his breath slow and even, his hands resting loosely upon the quilt. The gentle journeys of the night, the bell tower, the river, the songs in the square, the secret garden had woven themselves into his dreams, soft and without sharp edges. He dreamed of snow that shone with silver and gold at once, of quiet faces bathed in candlelight, of a single flame burning in an endless white field. In his dream, the town was not a collection of houses, but a cluster of lights, floating together in a great, dark sea, held in place by an invisible, loving hand. His body, tired in the most peaceful way, lay relaxed and warm, wrapped in the stillness that the night had poured into the little room. Outside, the first subtle sounds of morning began to thread their way into the hush. Somewhere, not far away, a board creaked as a door was softly tried, then closed again. A chimney, having rested through the deepest hours, woke with a faint sigh as a newly kindled fire took hold, sending up a slender line of smoke that rose straight into the cold, clear air. That smoke was no longer the thick, hurried sort of the late afternoon or the early evening, but a fine, lazy ribbon tinted faintly pink by the growing light. In another house, a kettle came to the boil, its small rattle and breath muffled by walls and snow, but present nonetheless part of the town's gentle awakening. A dog, having slept curled in a corner, lifted its head, yawned silently, and laid it down again, deciding that the morning need not be met in haste. Little by little, as the sky brightened, the silver of the snow began to hold hints of other colors. The first breath of sunlight, still hidden behind the mountains, brushed the eastern edges of the clouds with a deeper rose, then a pale orange, and these tones slipped down, reflected in the vast white below. Flat surfaces gleamed with a faint blush, while slopes and curves caught the light in subtle gradients. The rooftops, once uniformly gray in the darkness, took on a soft, luminous quality, their ridges highlighted in pale gold. Each icicle hanging from eaves or window ledges, grown long and clear in the night, captured a sliver of this light and turned it into a narrow, trembling blade of color. The frozen river, where it could be seen between drifts, reflected the changing hues of the sky in a long, narrow strip, a silver path now tinged at its edges with rose and pearl. It was about this time, as the world outside grew quiet and bright in equal measure, that Elias stirred. The first thing he felt was the gentle weight of the quilts, warm and reassuring over him. The second was the quality of the light in the room, changed now from the deep, flickering gold of candles to a softer, paler luminance slipping past the curtain. His eyes opened slowly. For a few moments he remained still, lying on his side, gazing at the faint silver shape of his own breath in the cool air and listening to the quiet. The ticking of the small clock on the shelf sounded clearer now that the deeper silence of the night had lifted from somewhere below, as if from far away. He thought he heard the faint clink of crockery, the soft murmur of voices moving like low streams under the snow. He sat up gradually, feeling the coolness of the morning touch his cheeks, then pushed back the quilts and swung his feet to the floor. The boards were cold under his soles, but in a way that felt clean and bracing, like fresh water splashed on a face. The candle by his bed had burned down completely while he slept, leaving only a small, hardened circle of wax and a darkened wick. Its watch ended without drama. The room itself looked different in this new light. The familiar furniture softened yet defined, the beams overhead highlighted in gentle streaks, the papers on his table touched with pale, slanting bands of white. He rose, smoothed the coverlet with a practiced hand, and moved toward the window, drawn by the brightness that pressed softly against the curtain. When he drew the fabric aside, the sight that greeted him was one he would remember long after the winter of 1882 had passed. The lane lay before him transformed, not by the falling snow that he had seen through the night, but by the dawn's first full light upon it. The drifts that had seemed heavy and somber in darkness now glowed with a quiet radiance, their surfaces sparkling with countless tiny points where the sunlight, just beginning to spill over the mountain's rim, struck individual crystals. The rooftops along the lane were capped with smooth, gleaming blankets of white. Every irregularity softened, every angle turned gentle. Chimneys, dressed in snow and edged with ice, sent up the faintest threads of smoke, which rose in straight lines before curling lazily, tinted a soft gold by the morning. Across the lane, the windows of the houses were brighter than they had been at any point in the night. the frost remained, its feathery patterns more visible now, etched in sharp, delicate lines of white and pale blue. But behind it, the daylight shone with a muted clarity. Candlelight, where it still burned, was no longer the only guardian of the rooms. It mingled now with the cool, steady presence of the sun. Elias could see shadowy figures moving gently inside, a woman bending over a stove, a child sitting at a table, legs swinging, an elderly man pulling back his own curtain and leaning close to the glass, his breath making small clouds on the pane. The town, once wrapped entirely in night's embrace, now found itself gently cradled between night and day, held in the brief, tender balance of early morning. Farther off, toward the square and the little church on the hill, the snow gleamed even more brightly. The bell tower stood against the sky like a patient, steadfast mark, its stone sides washed in the first true light. The cross at its peak, thin and simple, caught the sun's rays and shone faintly, a tiny, steady glimmer above the white world. Elias watched, and almost at once he saw a familiar puff of smoke rise from a small side chimney on the tower. Anders was awake, tending his stove and his clock, listening, as he always did, to the quiet between the hours. A moment later, the bell itself spoke, its tone clearer now, carrying farther in the cold, bright air. It rang not heavily, but with a gentle fullness, each note spreading over the silver rooftops like a slow, warm wave, announcing not simply the hour, but the arrival of Christmas morning. The sound of the bell reached into every corner, into the warm, close kitchens where families stirred pots and sliced bread, into the small bedrooms where children blinked and stretched and felt, without yet naming it, a special kind of excitement, into the solitary rooms where a single candle burned and a single pair of hands folded in quiet thanks. It slipped under doors and through cracks, slid between curtain and wall, touched the snow-laden roofs and the frozen river and the hidden secret garden behind the bookshop. There, the candle Elias had left still stood, its flame much lower now, burning in a small, determined point of gold at the center of untouched white. The bell's gentle call washed over it too, a soft greeting, as if acknowledging the little flame's long vigil in the heart of the night. As the bell fell silent, the sounds of morning began, very slowly, to gather. A door opened somewhere below, and the muted scrape of a shovel against packed snow began, rhythmic and unhurried, as someone cleared a small path from threshold to lane. Another door followed suit, and then another, each opening for a brief moment to let out a wash of warm air and the faint murmur of voices before closing again, leaving only the clean sound of metal moving through snow. A child's laughter rang out suddenly, bright and clear, quickly hushed by a gentle voice, but the echo of it lingered in the crisp air. The frozen river, still mostly hidden from view, held the light of the sky like a quiet mirror, its surface calm and silver, waiting for the footsteps and reflections that would come later in the day. Elias watched all this from his window for a long, peaceful while, letting the gentle dawn over the silver rooftops fill him. There was a freshness in the air that he could almost taste, a crisp, clean feeling that seemed to sweep through the town like a soft, invisible broom, brushing away the last traces of night, even as it honored the dreams that had unfolded there. He thought of the countless small stories that had passed quietly within the houses over these hours, the whispered prayers, the songs sung softly to sleepy children, the solitary moments of memory and hope, the simple warmth of body beside body under thick quilts. Now, under the growing light, these stories did not vanish. They settled gently into the foundation of the day, like embers beneath ash, ready to glow if stirred. In his heart, he felt no rush to begin the tasks of morning. The town was waking gently, and he wished to match its pace. Soon, he would go downstairs to prepare the stove, to warm water, to open the shop door. Even if few would visit on this snow-heavy Christmas day, he would walk again through the streets, perhaps to see how high the drifts had grown and to exchange quiet greetings with neighbors. But for now, he remained at the window, his hand resting lightly on the sill, his gaze tracing the soft lines of his transformed town. The night had wrapped it in deep, quiet snow. The dawn now wrapped it in soft, clear light. Between the two, the little town lay safe and still, its blizzard Christmas unfolding not as a story of hardship, but as one of calm, shared warmth and a gentle, silver peace. Morning settled more fully over the town, not with sudden brightness, but with a gentle, widening glow that seemed to seep into every corner of the snow-wrapped streets. The sun, hidden for so long behind cloud and storm, now rose above the mountain ridge in a soft, pale disk. Its light filtered through the lingering veil of cloud and the fine, drifting crystals in the air. It did not blaze. It merely offered a calm, steady radiance that laid itself tenderly over the rooftops, the chimneys, and the deep, silver folds of snow. Shadows grew longer and softer, stretching like sleepy arms along the lanes. The blizzard had passed and left behind not a scene of ruin, but a world hushed and shining, as though washed clean by the night. From his window, Elias watched the town ease itself into this quiet Christmas morning. Here and there, thin threads of smoke rose from chimneys, curling lazily upward before dissolving into the brightening air. A few figures moved cautiously through the deep snow, their steps slow and measured, shovels in hand, carving narrow paths from doors to streets. They were not hurried. There was no urgency, only the calm acceptance of a task that would take its own time. Snow lifted and fell in small, glittering arcs under their shovels, catching the morning light before joining the larger drifts. A child emerged from a doorway, bundled so completely in scarves and wool that only a small patch of rosy face showed, and stood for a moment in wonder, gazing at the high white walls built by the storm. A gentle voice called from within, and the child turned back, laughing softly, the sound quickly absorbed by the wide, soft silence. Elias felt the deep, rested calm of his own body, and with it a sense of completion, as though the long night had been a single, slow breath drawn in, and now, with daylight, was being released. He thought of the star that had watched over them, now hidden in the brightness of the waking sky, and of the candles and lanterns that had burned through the storm, some flickering low, some standing straight and tall, each a small, patient heart of light. He thought, too, of his quiet journeys, up to the bell tower, where time walked softly through the blizzard, down to the frozen river, where lanterns had laid golden paths over the silver ice, into the square, where voices had woven songs with candle flames, and into the secret garden, where a solitary candle had burned in the center of a sleeping world of snow. He turned from the window and moved about his small room with unhurried care. On the table lay the children's pages, still in their neat stack, and he touched them lightly, as if to remind himself that ordinary life, with its lessons and laughter and small pencil marks, would return when the snow loosened its hold on the roads. He set them aside and straightened the few items that had shifted in the night. A book slightly ajar, a scarf draped carelessly over the back of a chair. Then, with a quiet sense that this morning required some small ritual of its own, he took up one last candle from his cupboard, a modest ivory taper with an unburned wick, and held it for a moment in his hands. He carried it to the windowsill and set it there in the simple brass holder that had watched with him the evening before. The glass before him was no longer heavily frosted, yet delicate patterns still clung to the lower corners, glinting faintly in the sunlight. The snow outside rose nearly to the base of the pane, a smooth, shining bank pressing gently against the wall of the house. Beyond it, the lane gleamed in soft whites and pale blues, traced by a few narrow, newly cleared paths. Elias struck a match and touched its small flame to the wick. The candle caught easily, its fire rising in a slender golden tongue, steady and serene. It did not challenge the daylight. It merely added its own quiet warmth to it, as if acknowledging that there is room in the world for both sun and flame. He stood for a long moment with his hand resting lightly on the sill, watching the candle burn. The light it gave was gentle, a radiance that seemed more a feeling than a sight, wrapping itself around the room, touching the beams and the floor and the simple furniture with a soft, familiar glow. It reached toward him as well, resting against his face in a way that reminded him of the many winters he had already seen and the many nights he had walked home through snow to a waiting flame. Someone down the lane began to hum a slow carol, the notes low and almost to themselves, and the sound drifted up through the stillness to his window, threading itself around the candle's steady breath. He thought of the town in its entirety, of each house and room, of each person rising slowly into this quiet day. He saw, in his mind's eye, the widow at her kitchen table, hands wrapped around a warm mug, the steam silver in the morning light, the tailor leaning in his doorway, blinking at the brightness on the snow, his work set aside for the holy day, the music teacher opening her piano gently, her fingers resting on the cool keys before she played the first soft chords of a Christmas hymn. He saw children at windows, pressing their palms to the glass, tracing lines in the thinning frost, marveling again at the height of the drifts. He saw Anders in the tower, winding the clock with slow, practiced movements, listening as the bell's voice floated once more over the sunlit snow, now ringing not over a storm, but over a world held in calm. And as he looked at his candle, as he let the quiet of the morning soak into him, Elias felt a blessing rise within him, unbidden and gentle. It did not come as a grand proclamation. It came as a slow unfolding, like a bud opening to reveal its small, fragrant heart. In his thoughts, he spoke it to the town, to each house and each soul, to each snow-laden tree and each sleeping hill. He wished that the peace of the night, the soft snow, the calm star, the singing voices, the small, patient lights would not vanish completely with the day, but would linger in the corners of their hearts like a quiet, enduring glow. He wished that when evening came again, and on all evenings to follow, those who remembered this night would feel, at the sight of a single candle, some echo of the gentle safety that had wrapped the town in its silver arms. He wished, too, for sleep. Not only the sleep they had just left, deep and dream-washed, but all the sleep that would come to them in nights ahead. He wished that when worry pressed at their doors, when thoughts rattled like loose shutters in a high wind, they might remember the hush of this blizzard Christmas, the way snow can soften even the sharpest edge, the way a single flame can hold back the darkness with quiet courage. He wished that they might lie down on future nights and feel, as they closed their eyes, that they were again beneath a wide, gentle sky with a star watching, that they were again cradled by soft snow and kind silence, that they were again in a town where candles burned in every window and a secret garden held a faithful, golden heart of light. The flame on the windowsill bent slightly as a breath of air moved through the room, then straightened, unwavering. Elias smiled faintly, not from any particular thought, but from the full, simple feeling of being alive in this moment, in this place, on this soft morning. The town beyond his window might be small, the winter long, the days sometimes heavy with work and worry, yet there were also these hours of silver, quiet, these nights of songs and gentle snow, these mornings when light lay tenderly on every roof and drift. He let the sense of it settle over him like an extra quilt, warm and reassuring. In time, he would go down into the shop and open the front door. Even if only a few would come, perhaps a neighbor would step in, shaking snow from their boots, to warm their hands by his stove and talk softly of the beauty of the storm. Perhaps a child would run in, cheeks flushed from the cold, eyes bright with tales of deep snowbanks and glittering icicles. Perhaps no one at all would arrive, and he would simply sit by his small fire, mending a book's torn spine or reading a page or two by the window, the candle at his side, the town quiet beyond. Whatever the day brought, he knew he would carry with him the gentle weight of the night's peace, the memory of lanterns over ice and songs in the square, and that small, secret garden of midnight snow. For now, though, he let his thoughts drift outward one last time, beyond the town, beyond the river, beyond even the hills. His blessings stretched with them, thin and bright as a strand of silver light. He wished that anyone, anywhere, who found themselves alone in a storm, in a quiet room, or simply in their own unsettled thoughts, might feel some trace of this same calm. The feel of soft snow around them, the sight of a single candle's steady glow, the sense of a gentle presence in the sky above. He wished for them a long, deep rest, like the town's rest beneath the blizzard's hush. He wished that their dreams might be silver and soft, and filled with kind voices and peaceful stars. And if, in some far-off place, or some later time, a reader of this quiet tale should close its last page at night and blow out their own light, he wished that they, too, would feel as the people of the little town once felt, wrapped in a soft, safe darkness, held beneath a patient sky, watched over by small, steadfast flames. He wished that their pillow would feel cool and welcoming, their blanket warm and gentle, their breathing slow and easy. He wished that their thoughts would wander softly among silver rooftops and candlelit windows and slow, falling snow until thought itself thinned and dissolved, and only a quiet, tender sleep remained. So let the blizzard fade into memory and the candles burn down to their final golden embers. Let the star retreat behind the bright face of day, knowing it may return whenever it is needed. Let the town go on with its days and its seasons, carrying this night like a small, secret jewel in its heart. And let you, who have journeyed here in imagination, close your eyes now, if you wish, and rest. May your sleep be deep and peaceful, like a winter town held in gentle snow. May your dreams be soft and silver, lit by kind stars and sheltered by quiet, protective wings of night. May you wake, when you are ready, with a calm heart, as if you too had known the blizzard Christmas of 1882 and the small town's night by candlelight.